Some videos sugarcoat it. Some have pretty colors and cool graphs, and they catch your attention and hype you up. This one's going to be different, but if you watch the whole thing and you're actually honest with yourself, this could be the video that actually gets you started on the path to finally getting rich. Remember that all investing carries risk, so do your own research. This is not financial advice, and I'm not a financial advisor. Now look, this video is about the brutal truth, so expect some brutal truth. If you want to change your life financially, you need real data, real facts, and for some of you, a real kick in the leg to actually get started. Brutal truth number 1. You weren't born rich. I know this sounds funny, and most people actually use this as a joke, but it's actually true. Wealthy children have a major financial advantage. Children born into the top 20% of wealthy households are far more likely to remain in the top wealth brackets as adults than children born into lower income households. Research from the U.S. Treasury, Opportunity Insights, and various economists shows children born into the top 1% have a dramatically higher chance of staying wealthy, while children born into the bottom 20% have a relatively low probability of reaching the top 20%. Family wealth often matters more than income because wealth provides investment capital, education opportunities, housing advantages, and business opportunities. These advantages compound over decades, much like how investments compound. A child who receives a $100,000 investment account at age 20 and leaves it invested for 40 years at 8% ends up with over $2 million without adding another dollar. 99% of the people watching this right now probably don't fall into that category. You weren't born a millionaire, and you do have a tougher road than some people. So now you have a choice. Either complain or do something about it. Brutal truth number 2. You don't have the requisite knowledge. Yet like I said, some people are born into privileged households that have a lot of money. But more than that, they receive an education from those who made all of that money for them. If all you've seen growing up is bad spending habits, maxed out credit cards, late payments, and stress, then you probably just don't even know what a healthy relationship with money looks like. You need to educate yourself. The brutal truth within the brutal truth on this one is that you need to watch what you're watching to educate yourself. Instead of watching the video that says 5 stocks to buy now to go to the moon, be watching things like how to value a stock, or which investing account is best for long-term tax efficiency. You need to educate yourself on the world of investing, but even more so on things like macroeconomics, politics, money theory, and long-term investing based on actual data. The goal should always be to learn how to fish, not just be given the fish, because that doesn't help you long-term. Brutal truth number 3. You are focusing on the wrong thing. No, it's not about finding the absolute needle in the haystack, finding the exact right stock that is going to make you rich. And no, it's not about selling at a certain percentage and waiting until this one stock goes down to buy back in. If you're honest with yourself, your only strategy right now is hope, and you're not accepting the actual data. The most comprehensive ongoing study on this topic is the SPIVA, S&P Indices versus Active Scorecard, published semi-annually by S&P Dow Jones Indices. For over 20 years, SPIVA has tracked the performance of actively managed funds against their relevant index benchmarks worldwide. The data reveals a harsh truth. The longer the time horizon, the more active stock pickers fail. According to long-term SPIVA data, after 15 years, more than 85% to 90% plus of active large-cap managers fail to beat the S&P 500. Even when looking at elite institutional accounts and separately managed accounts, which have access to the best data, technology, and corporate rooms on Earth, the vast majority still underperform their benchmarks over a 10-year period. If professional fund managers with armies of analysts can't consistently beat just a simple S&P 500 fund, the odds of you, an individual retail investor without any of those advantages, beating it are very low. Then there's the lack of persistence, luck versus skill. A common counter-argument is, well, I'll just find a couple of stocks or managers that are outperforming the entire market and just invest in them. SPIVA addresses this through their persistence scorecard, which tracks whether managers who win in one period can keep winning. Research shows that outperformance is almost never sticky. Of the active funds that land in the top quartile of performance in any given year, virtually none manage to stay in the top quartile just 3 to 5 years later. Wharton School of Business Research echoes this, noting that past winners have roughly a 10% chance of outperforming 3 years in a row. Their winning streaks are statistically identical to a series of lucky coin flips. There are also mathematical realities, cost and drag. Every transaction costs something, whether it's explicit commissions, the bid-ask spread, or the management fees of a fund. A broader S&P 500 ETF can be held for an expense ratio as low as 0.03% and some even lower. Stock picking requires frequent trading, which introduces heavy friction. Over 20 or 30 years, compounding higher fees dramatically erodes wealth. Tax inefficiency. Stock picking inherently results in portfolio turnover. Every time a stock is sold for a profit to pivot into a new idea, a capital gains tax event is triggered if held in a taxable brokerage account. Passive index funds are highly tax efficient because they rarely sell underlying assets, illicit capital to compound untouched by taxes for decades. Skewness of market returns. This is perhaps the most vital piece of academic research on the topic. Professor Hendrik Bessembinder from Arizona State University analyzed decades of U.S. stock market data and discovered a fascinating mathematical reality. The entire net return of the stock market is driven by a tiny handful of mega winners. He found that the majority of individual stocks, nearly 60%, actually underperform cash equivalent treasury bills over their lifetimes. The massive wealth creation of the stock market is heavily skewed. Just a small percentage of stocks like Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, and Nvidia over recent decades drive virtually all of the market's historical upside. When you pick individual stocks, you run a high statistical risk of missing those few mega winners. When you buy an S&P 500 index fund, you're guaranteed to own 100% of the winners in their exact market cap proportion, while letting the index automatically filter out the losers over time. Brutal. Truth number 4, time and you aren't investing enough money. If you understand that the index is going to be the better move down the road than picking individual stocks, then there's hope for you. But as of right now, you aren't rich yet because of 2 main things. Time. No one wants to hear this, but it's so true. Let's say two people invest in the S&P 500, which historically has returned about 11% per year. Person 1 invests just $10,000 total. That's it. But they start at age 30. Person 2 invests $1,000 per month for 10 years, but starts at age 55. A total of $120,000 invested. At age 65, which one has more money? The person who invested $120,000 total is at $200,664. The person who only invested $10,000 total at age 30, letting it sit for 35 years compounding without ever adding another dollar, is at $385,748. Time is a very important thing in this investing journey. You aren't investing enough money. This needs to be shouted from the mountaintops. The more money you invest, the more money goes to work for you 24/7, compounding and working harder than you could ever work. Looking at that example from before, that person put $10,000 in at age 30, and it compounded to $385,000. But let's say she invested $500 per month during that 35-year period instead of adding nothing. Instead of ending at $385,000, she'd now be at $1,423,048. What a monumental difference. Some of you are fighting that voice in the back of your head saying, "Yeah, but who has an extra $500 per month to invest with?" Giving yourself that excuse keeps you safe and comfortable. Finding that extra $500 per month to invest is doable. It's just not easy. If you eventually want to be rich, you have to give up a lot of these excuses and be ready for a little bit of sacrifice. Brutal truth.